The call came just before dinner. "Mom, we're doing something small this year. You understand, right?" That single line sliced through me sharper than the winter air outside. It was the 5th Christmas in a row my son had said the same thing. Like he was reading from a polite script written to keep me out of his life. I stood by the window, the phone pressed to my ear, watching snow collect on the railing of a porch that had never felt emptier. His laughter echoed in the background. A woman's voice joined in. Amanda's, light and comfortable. They sounded happy, and I was the ghost still haunting their story. "Of course, honey," I said, forcing warmth into my tone. "You two enjoy yourselves." He didn't notice the tremor in my voice. He never does. When I hung up, the silence in the house thudded like a heartbeat in a hollow chest. The smell of cinnamon cookies still hung in the air, my yearly tradition no one asked for. No one shared. The lights I'd strung along the fireplace blinked in uneven rhythm, as if unsure whether to keep shining. Every mother dreams her child will come home. Mine stopped dreaming and started excusing. "They're busy," I told myself. "They have their own family now." But deep down I knew I had become inconvenient. I picked up one of the cookies, perfect edges dusted with sugar, and bit down hard enough to crack the surface. Sweet, bitter, identical to every Christmas that came before. I had built a life around being invited, and suddenly realized I was always waiting. Never chosen. Outside, laughter drifted from the neighbor's yard, wrapping around my house like music I wasn't allowed to dance to. I turned off the tree lights. The room dimmed into truth. I whispered into the dark. "This year, I'm done waiting." It wasn't a declaration of anger. It was a verdict. Tomorrow, I would bake again, not because someone was coming, but because I was still here, because the only invitation I needed was the one I wrote for myself. I didn't know it yet, but that night, the one when my son forgot me again, would be the last Christmas I ever spent apologizing for existing. The morning after that phone call, I woke up with the taste of sugar and regret on my tongue. The empty plate on the nightstand still had crumbs from the cookie I'd eaten in the dark. Like some secret I was too ashamed to admit even to myself. Outside, the world was painted in white. Fresh snow covered the steps. The yard, the street, the whole block looked like a Christmas card, except my house. With its dark porch light and quiet windows. Like a house someone forgot to color in. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to the heater rattle to life. My hands rested on my chest as if I was holding myself together. That sentence from last night kept looping in my head like a broken record. "We're keeping it small this year. You understand, right?" It always ended with that question. Not really a question, more like an order dressed up as concern. "You understand, right?" The truth was, I understood more than he thought. I understood because I remembered a time when small meant something different. It meant just the two of us in our old little house on Maple Street, before the polished dinners. Before the perfect family photos. Before I became the extra piece that didn't match the set. Back then, Christmas was ours. Jeremy used to wake me up before the sun, his little hands patting my arm, his curls smashed on one side from sleep. "Mama, Mama, get up, Santa came." I heard him. His voice would shake with excitement. The way grown men save for winning the lottery or hearing a yes at the altar. We didn't have much money. The tree was always a little crooked. The lights were secondhand from a church sale. And the presents under the tree never came in mountains. Just in small, carefully wrapped piles. But he never looked at what we didn't have. He only looked at me. "You did all this?" he'd whisper, running his fingers along the ribbon. "You made it pretty. Mama." Back then, he saw me. I'd pull him onto my lap, warm pajama fabric against my worn housecoat, and we'd open the gifts one by one. Second-hand action figures, a pair of sneakers I'd saved for months to buy, the big book of dinosaurs he carried around until the pages curled. I'd watch his face as he tore the paper, as if his joy was my own paycheck. After presents, I'd bake, always the same cookies, vanilla sugar cookies with cinnamon sprinkled on top. Jeremy called them Christmas stars. Even when they were shaped like little bells or snowmen, he'd sit on the counter, feet swinging, stealing bits of dough when he thought I wasn't looking. "You're cheating," I'd tell him, swatting at his hand. "I'm quality control," he'd say, mouth full, flour on his cheek. We used to laugh so loud. The radio didn't stand a chance. Those were the years when Christmas fit in one small living room and still somehow felt big enough for both of us. No one forgot to invite me. No one needed to explain why I didn't belong. Back then, our family was small by choice, not by exclusion. The bleeding didn't start all at once. Wounds like mine never do. It began the year he brought Amanda home. I remember the first time she stepped into my kitchen. Beautiful, polished, with nails neatly done and a scarf wrapped just right around her neck. The kind of girl who looks like she belongs in real estate brochures and brunch photos. She smiled wide, complimented my sweet potato pie, called me Mrs. Williams, even after I told her, "Please, baby, call me Marlene." She helped me set the table. Her movements efficient, practiced, but there was a distance in the way she looked at my faded curtains and chipped plates. Not cruel exactly, just assessing, as if she was deciding where I fit into the life she was already building. That first Christmas with her in the picture, Jeremy still came home. They arrived late, of course, apologizing with bright smiles and store-bought desserts. I watched as she reorganized my dishes, as she turned my simple table into something that looked like a magazine spread. Candles, folded napkins, name cards like we needed to be told who we were in my own house. I tried to be grateful. I told myself, "This is good. He has someone. He's not alone." I swallowed the little ache that came when she corrected him on how much sugar he should eat. When she changed the music from old Motown Christmas to some soft piano playlist. That night, as I washed dishes by the sink, I heard her in the living room say, "Next year, we should host at my parents'. They have more space." Her parents. I remember drying my hands slowly, listening for his answer like it was a verdict. "Yeah, that'd be nice," he said. "Mom can come too." Can, not will, not must, not of course she'll be there. Can. The next year, the invitation came late, weeks of silence, then a text 3 days before Christmas. "Hey, Mom, we're doing dinner at Amanda's parents'. You're welcome to come, but it's a bit of a drive and it might be a lot for you." Might be a lot for you. As if I hadn't taken buses in the snow with him on my hip. As if I hadn't walked home from night shifts, feet blistered, just to make sure he woke up to a hot breakfast. Suddenly, a 2-hour drive was too much for me? I told him it was fine. Typed back, "With the weather, I think I'll stay in. Y'all have fun." He replied with a thumbs up emoji. I stared at that tiny cartoon hand for a long, ugly minute, wondering when my son learned to summarize his feelings about me in one lazy symbol. That was the first Christmas I baked cookies alone. I lined them up on the tray like little soldiers, brushed them with melted butter, and sprinkled sugar over them the way my mother taught me. The house smelled exactly the same as it did when Jeremy was 8 and wearing Spider-Man pajamas. But the silence around the smell had changed. The laughter from the TV felt canned. The carols sounded like they were meant for other people. I kept checking my phone, expecting at least a picture, a call, some sign that I existed somewhere beyond the contact list. I got one text. "Merry Christmas, Mom. Busy here, but love you." I sat at the kitchen table staring at those 4 words until my coffee went cold. Busy here. Love you. I started to learn a new language then, the one where busy means you're not a priority, and love you means this should be enough for you. Don't ask for more. People talk about heartbreak like it's one big moment, one event that knocks you to your knees. But with Jeremy, it was never an explosion. It was a slow leak. A long, steady bleed you don't notice until you're lightheaded and reaching for something solid. It was the birthdays he forgot until Facebook reminded him. The "we'll try to stop by" that became "maybe next time." The way Amanda handled all the plans, the travel, the calendar, until it seemed like I had to book an appointment just to hear his voice. I tried not to make waves. I didn't nag, didn't guilt trip, didn't demand. The last thing I wanted to be was that mother, the one they talk about in whispers. The one who just can't let go. So instead, I shrank. I made myself small, careful, easy to neglect. I told myself this was what good mothers did when their sons started their own families. You step back, you make room. But there's a difference between stepping back and being pushed out the door. I remember one Thanksgiving when I offered to host. I'd already started planning the menu in my head: collard greens, mac and cheese, roasted turkey, peach cobbler. The house lit up, music on, the way my mother did it. On the phone, Amanda hesitated. "Oh, that's sweet, Marlene, but my parents already bought everything. We've got it covered. You don't need to go through all that trouble." Trouble. That's what my cooking had become. My traditions, my care. "What about Christmas then?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Silence. Then Jeremy cut in. "We're not sure yet, Mom. We'll figure it out. You understand, right?" There it was again, that little blade disguised as a question. You understand, right? That was the year I began writing things down in my planner, not just appointments, but feelings. Under December 25th, I didn't write Christmas. I wrote, waited for his call, came late, 6 minutes, talked mostly about work. The next year, I wrote, no invite, sent cookies anyway. They said thanks in a group text. I kept those planners stacked in a drawer by my bed, like evidence in a case no one else would ever try. Page after page, year after year, the pattern was as clear as black ink on white paper. The more comfortable his life with Amanda became, the less space there was for me. I watched it happen in small ways. The way she corrected him when he said, "Mama," instead of "Mom." The way she'd say, "We're so busy," as if my call was an interruption rather than a lifeline. The way every visit to their house felt like a guest appearance on a show that had already been running without me. There was the time I brought over a framed picture of Jeremy at 10. Holding the first bike I bought him. I thought it would be sweet. A memory to sit on their mantel. Amanda smiled, thanked me, and placed it on a side table in the hallway. The next time I visited, it was gone. "Where's the picture?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, I put it away so it wouldn't get dusty," she said. I never saw it again. Little things, small, polite cuts. I told myself I was being sensitive, that I was reading too much into things. I knew other mothers who didn't even hear from their children at all. At least he texted. At least he called sometimes. At least he said he loved me. At least, at least, at least. That phrase is how women like me stay bleeding and call it gratitude. The Christmas before this last one, he did invite me. It came out of nowhere. A week before the holiday. "Mom, you should come this year," he said. "Amanda's parents are doing a big dinner. They said it'd be nice to have you." It'd be nice to have you. Not, "We want you there." Not, "It wouldn't be the same without you." I went anyway. Of course I did. I wore my best dress. The one with the deep purple color that always made me feel like myself. I brought 2 pies, homemade, wrapped in foil still warm from the oven. Their house was big, bright, full of people who all hugged each other like they'd known one another forever. Someone took my coat and handed me a glass of wine. Amanda's mother told me, "We've heard so much about you," in a tone that made me wonder what exactly she'd been told. Dinner was long. The table stretched so wide I had to lean forward to hear the person across from me. Most of the conversation was about vacations I'd never been on, jobs I didn't really understand, investments and interest rates and things I'd never had the luxury to worry about. I laughed when they laughed. I smiled when they looked my way. I kept my stories short, my voice quiet. I didn't want to embarrass Jeremy. I kept thinking, just don't make it about you. Don't make trouble. Be easy. At one point, Amanda's father raised a glass and said, "To family, all of us together." Everyone clinked their glasses, smiling. I sat there, the warmth of the wine sliding down my throat, and realized something that hurt more than all the other Christmases combined. Even when I was finally invited, I still didn't feel like I belonged. After dessert, I noticed they'd served Amanda's mother's store-bought pumpkin pie and barely touched mine. My pies sat at the end of the table, perfectly golden, untouched except for one polite slice Jeremy took and didn't finish. On the drive home that night, the car felt colder than the air outside. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I told myself to be grateful. They included you, I thought. Isn't that what you wanted? But underneath that forced gratitude was a quiet, stubborn truth. I didn't want to be included like a favor. I wanted to be wanted. By the time this last Christmas Eve rolled around, the one with that final, "We're keeping it small." You understand, right? The wound wasn't new. It was old, layered, scarred over and cracked open again too many times to count. It was there in every cookie I baked alone. In every planner page with empty squares on holidays. In every voicemail I replayed just to hear his voice, even when the words made me feel smaller. That night, as I stood in my dark living room, the Christmas tree light unplugged, I realized something that felt like a shift in the earth under my feet. This wasn't just one bad Christmas. This was a pattern, a history, a slow, quiet erasure of me from my own son's life. And for the first time, instead of asking what I had done wrong, I started to ask a different question. What happens if I stop bleeding for people who don't even notice I'm hurt? The answer wouldn't come that night. It would arrive later, in the shape of a cabin in the mountains, a set of keys, and a word I hadn't dared to claim for myself in years. Mine. But before that turning point, before the mountains and the freedom, there had to be a day when everything finally cracked open. A day when truth walked through the door and refused to leave. That day was coming. And when it did, it wouldn't be small. It happened on a Tuesday, a gray one. The kind of morning that forgets what color is. The kind that seeps into your bones before you even realize it. I was in the kitchen, wiping down the counter, when my phone lit up. Jeremy. That name still carried the weight of all my old habits, the breath I'd hold before answering. The way my hand would shake with a mix of hope and caution. "Mom." His voice was bright, too bright. That tone he used when he wanted something. "I saw the pictures you posted. The cabin looks amazing." My cabin. My little A-frame on the side of a mountain that smelled like cedar and new beginnings. The house I'd bought with my savings. Fixed with my own 2 hands. And filled with silence that finally felt like peace. "I'm glad you like it," I said. "We were just talking," he went on. "Amanda and I thought maybe we could come up for a weekend. You know, to help you settle in." Help me. That word again. Soft but loaded. Like he was giving me permission to share what was already mine. "I've already settled," I said, quiet but steady. "Oh, well, maybe we could visit anyway. Amanda's parents would love to see the mountains too." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to the countertop. Her parents. The same people who hosted every Christmas I wasn't invited to. The same people whose table I'd sat at like a polite stranger. Smiling through silence. "You're welcome to visit sometime, Jeremy," I said, my voice flat, "but this house isn't a vacation rental." There was a pause. I could hear Amanda in the background, whispering something. Then his voice again, thinner now. "Mom, we just thought." "I know what you thought," I cut in. "You thought I'd say yes. Because I always do." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was heavy. Like the pause between thunder and its echo. "Wow," he said finally, trying to laugh but not pulling it off. "Okay, I didn't realize this was such a big deal." "It's not a big deal," I replied. "It's a boundary." That word hung there like smoke. He didn't know what to do with it. My son, who had learned to live so comfortably inside my forgiveness, didn't recognize what it sounded like when I finally stopped offering it. When the call ended, my hands were trembling, not from anger, but from the sudden rush of calm. The kind that comes when you stop fighting for something that's been gone a long time. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small after talking to him. I felt real. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Thick envelope, expensive paper, Amanda's handwriting, neat, perfect, impersonal. I sat by the window to read it, the mountain light spilling across the table. "Marlene, I hope you're doing well. We're writing because we're in a bit of a transition. Jeremy's job has been stressful. And with the baby on the way, we've been thinking it might be good to have some quiet time away from the city. Your cabin looks like the perfect place for that. Fresh air, peace, privacy. We'd only stay for a few months, just until things settle. I'm sure you'd want to help your family during a time like this. Love. Amanda." My hands went still on the page. That word, help, again. Over and over in my life. It had been the chain disguised as kindness. Help with the baby, help with the bills, help with the holidays. But help always meant sacrifice. And sacrifice always meant me. I read the letter twice. Then a third time. Until the words blurred. My heart didn't race. It didn't even hurt. It just settled, quiet and sure, the way snow falls when the storm has finally decided it's done. I walked to the fireplace, struck a match, and fed the paper to the flames. It curled fast, edges glowing orange, handwriting turning to smoke, the room filled with that faint burnt paper smell, final, irreversible. For years, I'd kept every card, every message, every scrap of proof that I still belonged somewhere in their world. But this letter was the first thing I ever chose to erase. As the last piece of it turned black, I said out loud, no. Not a shout, not a scream, just a word that finally belonged to me. That night, my phone buzzed. Jeremy again. "Mom," he said, voice tight, "we heard from Amanda's parents that you got the letter. Why haven't you called back?" "Because I didn't need to," I said. "Mom, we're not asking for much. Amanda's pregnant, she just needs some rest. We thought it'd be good for everyone." "For everyone," I repeated, "or just for you?" He sighed. "Don't make it sound like that. We were trying to include you this time." "This time?" I echoed. my voice steady as stone. Jeremy, for 5 years you forgot me every Christmas. For 5 years, I baked cookies for no one, waited by the phone for a call that never came. And now that I have something of my own, suddenly I'm useful again? It's not like that. Then what is it like? The silence that followed was sharp. I could hear him breathing, could almost feel the guilt working its way through the line. But pride was stronger. You're overreacting, he said finally. You sound bitter. Maybe I am, I said. Bitterness is what grows when kindness goes unanswered. He started to say something else, but I cut him off. You can stay wherever you like, Jeremy, just not here. This house isn't built on guilt. It's built on peace, and I'm not trading that for anything. When I hung up, I sat in the quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet that doesn't hurt anymore, the kind that listens with you. A few days later, Cassandra, the real estate agent who sold me the cabin, called to check in. How's my favorite mountain woman doing? She teased. I laughed, genuinely this time, still learning what silence sounds like when it's not loneliness. You sound lighter, she said. I was actually calling about something. There's been some interest in holiday rentals up that way. You could make a nice bit of money if you ever wanted to rent your place out. I smiled. No, Cassandra, this one's not for rent. She chuckled. Good answer. I had a feeling you'd say that. When the call ended, I stayed by the window. Snow had started again, thick flakes swirling like feathers. The fire behind me crackled softly, the cabin warm and alive. And for the first time, I realized the storm outside wasn't a threat anymore. It was a reflection, wild, cleansing, alive. That evening, another message came through from Jeremy. We're worried about you, Mom. You've changed. Amanda says you're shutting us out. We just wanted to be part of your life again. I stared at those words until they blurred, then laughed, a small, bitter laugh that came from somewhere deeper than pain. They wanted to be part of my life again now that it looked peaceful. Now that I had something they didn't control. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my planner, the same one where I'd once written, "Next year, don't wait for an invitation." Below it, I wrote a new line. "This year, don't apologize for saying no." Then I closed it, feeling something shift inside me, the kind of quiet strength that doesn't need witnesses. The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds. It came in soft, golden, spilling over the snowdrifts outside. I made coffee and sat by the fire. For years, I'd built my life around the word understand. Every time Jeremy said it, "You understand, right?" what he really meant was, "You'll forgive us again, won't you? You'll make it easy." But I didn't understand anymore. I didn't owe ease to anyone. That was the real clash, not between mother and son, but between who I was and who I'd been trained to be. The version of me that waited by the phone, that baked cookies for empty tables, that accepted crumbs and called them love, she didn't survive that fire. What rose from the ashes of Amanda's letter was someone different. Someone whole. Someone who finally believed peace was not a prize you earned by suffering quietly. It was something you claimed by saying no. The following week, Cassandra invited me to a small dinner in town. A few of us locals get together. She said, "You'll love them, good people, good food." I almost said no. Old habits die slow. But then I remembered how empty my house used to feel when I was surrounded by the wrong people. So I said yes. That night, at the little diner tucked between the post office and the antique store, I met Carol, a widow with soft eyes and a laugh that made you forget winter existed. She told me how her grown children lived in Florida now, too busy to visit. We swapped stories over chili and cornbread. And somewhere in the middle of her talking, I realized something. I wasn't alone. There were so many of us, mothers, fathers, grandparents, sitting in quiet houses across the world, mistaking neglect for fate. But here, in this mountain town, we were slowly building something new. A family made of choice. Not blood. As we walked out into the cold night, Carol linked her arm through mine and said, "It's funny, isn't it, how peace doesn't come from getting them back, but from finally letting them go?" I smiled. It's the hardest kind of freedom. Snowflakes caught in her hair like tiny stars. "Worth it though," she said. We said goodnight, and as I drove back to my cabin, I realized the real justice had already happened. Not in courts or arguments. Not through guilt or revenge, but in the quiet reclaiming of my own life. By the time I reached home, the moon had risen high above the valley. I stepped out of the car, boots crunching in the snow, and looked at the cabin, the soft yellow light glowing through the window. The smoke curling from the chimney. It looked nothing like the house I used to live in. And for the first time in years, that was exactly how I wanted it. I whispered into the night, "Let them call it distance. I'll call it peace." The snow that morning had a different weight to it, softer. Quieter, as if the whole mountain was holding its breath. I stood by the porch railing with a mug of coffee warming my hands and watched sunlight catch the icicles that hung from the roof. Every glint looked like a small truth trying to break through. It had been a week since Jeremy's last call, the one that ended with the word, bitter, echoing in my ear. I hadn't heard from him or Amanda since, and the silence had stopped feeling heavy. It felt clean. I spent the days fixing things around the cabin, repainting the shutters, tightening loose screws on the porch, stacking firewood until my arms ached in that satisfying way work does when you're doing it for yourself. Each little task was a reminder. I built this. I belong here. By the end of January, the cabin wasn't just livable, it was mine in every sense. I'd found a rhythm. Mornings with coffee and the sound of snow melting. Afternoons reading by the fire. Evenings sharing laughter with Carol and the others in town. It was the kind of life I never knew I wanted, because I'd spent too many years trying to earn someone else's approval instead of my own. Then, one morning, there was a knock at the door. 3 short raps, followed by the shuffle of boots on the porch. When I opened it, I froze. Jeremy stood there, wrapped in his city coat, scarf too thin for mountain cold. Behind him, a car idled, Amanda in the passenger seat, sunglasses on even though the sky was overcast. "Mom," he said, breath visible in the air. We were in the area. The area, 3 hours from Denver. I stepped aside, just enough to let the cold wind in. "Not them, you should have called," I said. He smiled that polite smile of his. The one that used to make teachers, neighbors, and girlfriends adore him. "We wanted to surprise you." Amanda's voice drifted from the car window. "We brought you something. A few things for the baby, well, for when he visits." My stomach turned. The baby, the one she wanted to bring here. I folded my arms. "Congratulations," I said, "but you shouldn't have driven all this way." Jeremy looked past me, eyes moving over the cozy living room. The new rug, the glow from the fire. "It looks even better in person," he said softly. "You really did it." I did. A beat of silence. The wind pushed against the doorframe. Then came the real reason for the visit. "So, about the house," he began, shifting his weight. "Amanda's been thinking maybe we could help you manage it. Like, rent it out when you're not here. It could be a family project. You'd still have your space, of course. But we could." "Stop." My voice was calm, but it cut through the air like a blade. "Jeremy, I'm not renting this house. And I'm not handing it over for anyone to manage." He blinked, surprised by the firmness. "Mom, I'm just trying to help. You don't have to do everything on your own." "I like doing things on my own," I said. "That's how I got this far." Amanda climbed out of the car, pulling her coat tighter. "Marlene, we're just offering. You don't have to be defensive." I turned to face her fully. "Defensive is what you call it when a woman finally says no." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I looked back at Jeremy. "I bought this cabin with my savings. I signed the deed. I fixed the roof, painted the walls, and built the shelves myself. It's not a project. It's not a rental. It's my home. Mine. He exhaled sharply, his breath fogging the air. You've changed, Mom. Good, I said. It was about time. They stood there, speechless. The snow kept falling, slow, steady, unbothered. I think it's best you head back, I added, hand resting on the door. The roads get bad after noon. Amanda muttered something under her breath as she turned to the car. Jeremy hesitated a moment longer, looking at me with a mix of confusion and something I hadn't seen in years, respect. Though he didn't recognize it yet. Call us when you cool off, he said finally. I'm not angry, I replied. I'm free. Then I closed the door. Not slammed, just closed. Softly, firmly. The fire had burned low, but I didn't add more wood right away. I just stood there, listening to the quiet after their departure. For years, my boundaries had been lines in the sand, easy to cross. Washed away by the tide of guilt. But this one, this door I'd just closed, felt like it was made of stone. And on the other side of it, I could finally breathe. Later that week, I met with Linda, one of Carol's friends, who happened to be a lawyer. She specialized in property law and small-town estates. Over coffee at the diner, I asked her to review my ownership documents. Everything looks clean, she said, flipping through the papers. You bought this in full. It's yours outright, no co-signers, no secondary claim. I just want to make sure there's no way someone could twist it, I said. She smiled knowingly. Smart of you to check. Happens more often than you'd think. But no one can touch this place unless you let them. I nodded, relief settling in like warmth after cold. She leaned in a bit. You want my advice? Get your will updated, not out of fear, out of clarity. Decide where your peace goes when you're done with it. That night, I did exactly that. I sat by the fire, pen in hand, and wrote everything down. My house, my savings, even the little gold ring I kept from my mother. None of it would go to Jeremy or Amanda. It wasn't revenge, it was protection. The quiet kind that ensures your story ends on your own terms. Instead, I left it all to the community center in town. The one that fed people during the winter storms. Carol's husband had volunteered there before he passed, and it felt right. When I signed my name at the bottom of that paper, I felt lighter than I had in years. Weeks passed, the mountains began to thaw, icicles fell from the roof, the snow turning to rivulets that traced silver paths down the dirt road. Every now and then, I'd get a call from Jeremy. Sometimes I answered, sometimes I didn't. The ones I picked up followed the same pattern. How are you, Mom? I'm fine. We're worried about you. No need. Then the guilt, always dressed as concern. You've been distant. You've changed. You're shutting us out. And every time, I'd smile and say, you can't shut out people who already left. He never had a response to that. In March, a small box arrived in the mail. No return address. Just my name in familiar handwriting. Inside was a framed photo. Jeremy and Amanda, standing in front of a perfect suburban house. Smiling, the baby bump just visible. A note tucked behind it read, "We wanted you to see what you're missing." No, love, no, Mom, not even a signature. I stared at it for a long time. The pettiness, the quiet cruelty disguised as pride. Then I placed the photo face down in a drawer and shut it. Not in anger, not even in sadness, but in closure. That night, as I sat by the fire, Carol came over with a bottle of red wine. You okay? She asked, settling into the chair across from me. I nodded. Better than okay. Just learning the difference between family and familiarity. She smiled, toasting her glass toward me, to knowing the difference. We drank, and the cabin filled with laughter, not the forced kind that used to echo at someone else's table, but the kind that starts deep and spills out like light. Spring arrived slowly in the mountains. The first wildflowers began pushing through the thawed earth. The air lost its bite. The mornings softened. One evening, while walking the trail behind the cabin, I stopped to look at the valley below, a ribbon of mist winding between pine trees and golden fields. The sun was setting, spilling light like honey. I thought about all the years I'd spent believing love meant obedience. That motherhood meant endless forgiveness. That peace was something you earned by staying quiet. But standing there, breathing in the mountain air, I understood something I'd missed all my life. Peace isn't a gift someone gives you. It's the silence you claim after you stop explaining yourself. I whispered it aloud, to the sky, to the wind, to every woman who'd ever been told she was too much, too loud, too demanding, too alone. This silence, I said, is mine. And somewhere, deep inside, the balance finally shifted. A week later, Carol brought me an invitation, handwritten, decorated with little silver stars. Community dinner, she said, smiling. They want you to come. Maybe even make those cookies you talk about so much. I laughed. I haven't made those in years. Well, she said, nudging me gently, maybe it's time to bake them for people who'll actually eat them. That evening, I found myself in the kitchen again. The air smelled of cinnamon and vanilla. I rolled the dough, cut the stars, pressed sugar crystals on top, the same way Jeremy used to do when he was small. But this time, when I pulled them from the oven, I didn't feel the ache of memory. I felt warmth, continuity, life. I packed them into a tin, grabbed my coat, and headed out into the cool spring night. As I walked toward the glow of the community hall, laughter and music spilling out into the street, I realized the reversal had already happened. I wasn't the one waiting for an invitation anymore. I was walking toward a life that had finally opened its door to me. The first spring rain came like forgiveness, soft, steady, and unannounced. I woke to the sound of drops hitting the tin roof, a rhythm both foreign and familiar. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up waiting for my phone to buzz. The world outside was enough. The cabin smelled faintly of pine and coffee. I stood at the kitchen window, watching mist slide down the valley, and realized something simple but enormous. Peace doesn't have a sound. It's what's left when the noise finally stops. For months now, I'd been living in that silence, repairing, repainting, rebuilding, not out of desperation, but devotion. Every nail hammered, every floorboard polished was a conversation between the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. At night, I'd sit on the porch with a blanket over my shoulders, watching the stars scatter across the sky. No voices, no demands, no guilt, just the hum of the earth, alive and still. That, I thought, was my revenge. Not the kind that burns bridges or ruins reputations, but the kind that builds something better without asking permission. The kind that makes silence feel like power instead of punishment. By summer, the valley had bloomed. Wildflowers burst across the hills in waves of yellow and violet. The townspeople began stopping by more often. Carol, of course. With her easy laugh, Louis, who brought me jars of honey, and Anne and Claudia, the couple who ran the bookstore down the road. They never asked about my family. And I never offered. We talked about gardens, recipes, weather, the simple things that make a life feel full again. One afternoon, Carol arrived with a basket of peaches and a grin that could melt ice. I saw your post online, she said, setting the fruit on the counter. That picture of your cabin, it's gone viral in the local group. Everyone's saying it looks like a postcard. I laughed. I just wanted to share what peace looks like. Well, she said, pulling out a peach and taking a bite, it looks damn good on you. Her words sat warm in my chest long after she left. That night, I posted another photo, the porch lights glowing against a dark blue sky. Caption: Home isn't where they welcome you. It's where you stop asking to be invited. Within hours, the comments came flooding in. Strangers wrote things like, "This made me cry," and "I needed to hear this tonight." And for the first time in my life, my words reached people who actually understood the kind of loneliness that teaches you to be strong. Jeremy didn't comment, neither did Amanda, but I knew they'd seen it. A few days later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address this time. Just my name in Amanda's familiar, perfect handwriting. Inside was a photo, the baby, red-cheeked and swaddled, sleeping peacefully, and beneath it, a short note. You should meet your grandson. He deserves to know his family. The word family pressed against my chest like a bruise. I set the photo on the table, next to a mug of cooling tea, and looked at it for a long time. He was beautiful, innocent, untouched by the cold patterns of his parents' pride. But I also knew what that letter really meant. It wasn't an olive branch. It was a hook. If I said yes, it would start again, the guilt, the imbalance, the invitations that felt like pity. So I didn't reply, not out of anger, but clarity. Some doors, once closed, must stay closed for peace to breathe. That night, I walked outside and looked up at the moon, a thin silver slice resting above the pines. You'll be fine, little one, I whispered, you'll grow, and maybe one day you'll understand that distance can be love, too. By autumn, I was no longer the woman who lived alone up the hill. I was Marlene from the cabin. People waved when I drove into town. The diner waitress always poured my coffee just right. One Saturday, Carol organized a dinner at my place. You've got the prettiest view in town, she said. It's time we enjoyed it. The evening glowed with firelight and laughter. Anne brought her famous roasted chicken. Claudia made cornbread. Louis arrived with wine that could warm any heart. I baked the old cookies, cinnamon sugar stars, not out of nostalgia, but celebration. When the table was full, Carol raised her glass. To Marlene, she said, who taught us that starting over isn't the same as giving up? They all clinked their glasses. And I laughed, really laughed, the kind that lifts you from the inside. I looked around that table and realized that every empty space I used to mourn had been quietly filled by new faces. New laughter, new belonging. Not the family I lost, the one I built. A week later, Jeremy called again. His voice carried that mix of charm and control I used to mistake for care. Mom, he began, I heard you've been having people over. Amanda saw it online. You didn't think to tell us? Tell you what? I asked. That you're entertaining strangers instead of your own family. Strangers? I said, smiling to myself. You mean my friends? He sighed. You're acting different, Amanda says. Tell Amanda, I interrupted, that I stopped living for her approval when I turned 60. There was silence on the line. Mom, he said finally, voice trembling with something like disbelief. What happened to you? I started listening, I said, mostly to the quiet. He didn't know what to do with that. Most people don't. Look, he said, softening his tone, we're planning a christening for the baby next month. You should come. It'd mean a lot. The words, mean a lot, hit differently now. They used to sound like love. Now they sounded like leverage. I appreciate the invite, I said gently, but I'll be busy. Busy doing what? Living. He exhaled sharply. Fine, suit yourself. I already have, I said, and hung up. When the line went dead, I didn't cry, I didn't even flinch, I just looked out the window at the trees glowing gold in the fading light and thought. This is what peace sounds like when it refuses to apologize. Winter returned, quiet and white. The mountain air had that clean, sharp scent again. I decorated the cabin with pine branches and candles, not for anyone else, but because beauty still mattered. Carol came by on Christmas Eve, carrying a basket of food. Thought we'd bring the celebration to you this year, she said. Behind her were Louis, Anne, and Claudia, bundled in coats and smiles. They filled the cabin with chatter and music, the warmth of food and friendship melting the chill from the air. Halfway through dinner, Carol looked at me and said, You know what I love about you, Marlene? You don't talk about revenge, but you live it. I laughed, surprised. Revenge? Me? She nodded. Yeah, the kind that doesn't hurt anyone. The kind that says, I'm happy now, and you don't get to take that from me. I thought about that for a moment, then smiled. Then I suppose I've been getting even for a while. The others laughed, glasses raised again, the firelight dancing against the walls. It wasn't a grand celebration. It wasn't a picture-perfect family dinner. But it was real, laughter echoing against wood beams, snow falling outside, hearts beating in sync with warmth and honesty. Later that night, after they'd all left and the last candle had burned low, I walked to the window. The valley below shimmered under moonlight, and for a brief moment, I saw the reflection of my younger self, the woman who waited by the phone. The woman who baked cookies for no one. She smiled at me, and I smiled back. Thank you, I whispered, for holding on long enough to let me find this version of myself, the one who no longer needs to be chosen to feel whole. A few days later, another letter arrived. It was from Amanda again, shorter this time. We're worried about you. You've changed. Jeremy misses you. Please call. The paper smelled faintly of her perfume. Sharp and sweet, the kind that lingers after a person leaves the room. I folded it once and placed it in my desk drawer, on top of the photo of their baby. Some stories don't need an ending, just distance. That night, I opened my planner. Last year's note still sat there in my handwriting. Next year, don't wait for an invitation. Below it, I wrote another line. This year, I'm booked. The snow began to fall again. Slow and certain, I wrapped myself in a blanket, sat by the fire, and listened to the sound of it landing softly on the roof. Each flake was a memory, not a wound anymore, just something passing, settling, fading. I had learned that silence could heal louder than forgiveness ever could. Some people never come back when you stop giving them access to your pain. And that's the point. Because the quiet life I built wasn't about closing doors. It was about finally living in a house with windows wide open. The first snow of the new year came early, thick and soundless. It blanketed the cabin roof before sunrise, softening every edge of the world. From the window, I could see only white and stillness, the kind of quiet that hums like a heartbeat beneath the surface of life. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders and poured a cup of coffee. The steam curled into the cold air, disappearing almost as quickly as it formed. The house smelled of cedar and cinnamon, a familiar mix that reminded me of every season one had survived. On the far side of the living room sat the chair, my visitor's chair. Simple, wooden, padded with a faded plaid cushion I'd found at a thrift store in town. It wasn't fancy, but it was comfortable. I'd placed it near the fire for company, though for most of the year, it stayed empty. That morning, I found myself staring at it longer than usual. There was something beautiful about its emptiness. It didn't ache the way it used to. It didn't feel like a missing piece, just a space held open for whatever, or whoever, life decided to send my way. I smiled, tracing the rim of my coffee mug with my finger. I used to imagine that chair filled, first with Jeremy, then Amanda, then a grandchild bouncing on someone's knee. I pictured us laughing, pretending that the old wounds never existed. But those were dreams built on the bones of need. And need had stopped building my life a long time ago. Now, that chair belonged to peace itself. Later that day, Carol stopped by with a loaf of bread still warm from the oven. "It's too quiet out there," she said, stamping snow off her boots. "Thought you could use some noise." She placed the bread on the counter and looked around, smiling. "You've made this place glow, Marlene. It feels alive." "It is," I said softly. "It finally is." She spotted the chair by the fire and grinned. "You keeping that one for me?" "Always," I said, gesturing for her to sit. We spent the afternoon there, two women wrapped in the comfort of shared quiet. No gossip, no pity, just presence. She talked about her garden plans for spring. I told her about the new shelf I wanted to build. The kind of conversations that fill the air with warmth, not noise. When she left, I walked her to the door, and as the wind rushed in, I caught a glimpse of the valley below. The snow was still falling, each flake unique, each one part of the same endless story. That night, I lit a single candle on the windowsill. It had become my small ritual, a way of honoring what was gone and what had grown in its place. As the flame flickered, my reflection appeared in the glass. The woman staring back at me didn't look like the one who used to flinch when the phone rang, afraid of another polite rejection. Her eyes were steady now, framed by lines that told a story not of sadness, but survival. I thought about Jeremy then, not with anger, not even sorrow, just a quiet recognition that love sometimes runs out of room when one person stops shrinking. I wondered if he'd ever drive back up this mountain, unannounced again. If he did, I decided, I wouldn't turn him away. But I wouldn't move aside either. The door could open, yes, but only if he knocked with something true. The days that followed unfolded like pages from a slower book. The snow kept falling, and I kept living, painting, baking, reading by the fire. The cabin had become more than a house. It was a reflection of everything I'd reclaimed. Sometimes, on still evenings, I'd hear laughter drifting from the valley. The sound of families gathered together. It didn't sting anymore. It was simply part of the world's soundtrack, one I didn't need to belong to in order to enjoy. I began writing letters, not to send, just to release. Letters to the woman I used to be. To the people who hurt me without meaning to. And even to the people who did. I kept them in a box under the bed. Sealed, unread. Maybe one day I'd burn them. Maybe not. Some fires aren't for destruction, they're for warmth. One morning in late February, I found an envelope on the porch. No name, just the handwriting I'd know anywhere. Jeremy's. Inside was a single page. Mom. We're fine. The baby's walking now. He says, Nana, when he sees your picture. Amanda framed it, the one of you from last Christmas. I know things between us aren't right, but I wanted you to know that he knows who you are. No apology, no invitation, just acknowledgement. I sat with the letter for a long time. The words were simple, but they carried something that had been missing all these years: honesty. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to respond. I simply placed the letter in the visitor's chair, folded neatly like an offering, and whispered, "That's enough." The fire crackled softly beside it, as if the house itself exhaled. Weeks later, I took a walk through town. The snow had begun to melt, revealing patches of green earth underneath. Children were tossing snowballs near the general store, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. Louis called out from across the street, waving, "You coming to the spring fair, Marlene?" "I'll be there," I called back, smiling. And I meant it. Because for the first time in decades, the answer to life's invitations wasn't, "I'll try." It was yes. That evening, when I returned home, the setting sun turned the mountains gold. I stepped onto the porch, feeling the last warmth of the day against my skin. Inside, the fire had dimmed, only embers now, glowing quietly, persistent, alive. The visitor's chair sat where it always had, empty but expectant, bathed in the orange light of dusk. I imagined Jeremy sitting there one day, older, tired, softened by his own mistakes. Maybe he'd hold his son on his lap. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he'd just sit, look around, and finally see me. Not the mother who waited, but the woman who stopped needing to be forgiven for wanting peace. And if that day ever came, I knew exactly what I'd do. I'd pour him a cup of coffee, hand it to him with both hands, and say, "You understand, right?" Then I'd smile, not to wound, not to win, but to remind him that time can change meanings, that even the sharpest phrases can dull into grace. As night fell, I added another log to the fire. The flame caught slowly, stretching toward the air like a promise. I sat in my chair and watched it until the world outside turned silver. The visitor's chair beside me remained empty, and somehow, that emptiness felt whole, not waiting, not aching, just open. Because life, I've learned, isn't about who fills your house on holidays. It's about who fills your silence when everyone else leaves. The candle on the windowsill flickered, its reflection merging with the falling snow. Outside, the world rested beneath a soft white blanket, untouched, unhurried. And inside, for the first time in all my years, so did I.